Hello everyone. Today I'm going to tell you one of the most fascinating and mysterious stories in history. The mystery of the Titanic. You've probably heard about the Titanic before. Maybe you've seen the famous movie or read about it in books. But I promise you, after listening to this, you will feel like you're hearing this story for the first time. I'm going to tell you everything in great detail, and some things might even surprise you. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of the Titanic. By the end of this story, you will not only learn about the Titanic, but also improve your English skills. The Titanic was not just a ship. It was a dream, a symbol of luxury, success, and human achievement. Let's go back to the early 1900s, when ships were the main way to travel across oceans. At that time, two shipping companies, White Star Line and Cunard Line, were competing to build the best and most luxurious ships in the world. Cunard Line had two fast and famous ships, Lusitania and Mauretania. These ships were fast, but White Star Line wanted to do something different. They didn't just want speed. They wanted luxury, comfort, and size. White Star Line decided to build 3 ships that would be the largest and most luxurious in the world: Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. Out of these, Titanic became the most famous, but not for the reasons the company hoped. The Titanic was built in Belfast, Northern Ireland, by a shipbuilding company called Harland and Wolff. The construction started in March 1909 and took almost 3 years to complete. Thousands of workers worked day and night to build this giant ship. It was 882 feet, 269 meters, long, and 175 feet, 53 meters, tall. Imagine this: the Titanic was almost the size of 3 football fields placed end to end. Now, let's talk about why the Titanic was called unsinkable. The ship had 16 watertight compartments, and the engineers believed that even if 4 of these compartments filled with water, the ship would still float. This technology was so advanced at the time that people thought it was impossible for the Titanic to sink. The vice president of White Star Line, a man named Philip Franklin, was so confident that he said in front of the public, "The Titanic is unsinkable." Everyone believed it. The media wrote about it. It became the ship that could never sink. Now, let's step inside the Titanic and see what made it so luxurious. At that time, traveling on the Titanic was not just a journey. It was an experience. The ship's interiors were designed to look like a 5-star hotel. In fact, many people said that the Titanic was even better than the best hotels in the world. The wood panelling on the walls was carved by hand and polished to shine. The stained glass windows sparkled in the sunlight. There were 2 grand staircases, and one of them, the first-class grand staircase, became iconic. It was decorated with iron railings, gold details, and a beautiful glass dome above it. This staircase connected several decks and was where wealthy passengers would gather to show off their expensive clothes. The Titanic had more than just beautiful rooms. It had facilities that were rare for ships at that time. A heated swimming pool, a Turkish bath where passengers could relax, an electric bath, considered a modern luxury, a gymnasium with exercise machines, a squash court for sports lovers, and a library where passengers could read books. There were 2 barber shops for grooming and haircuts. There were also restaurants, cafes, and smoking rooms where passengers could socialize. One of the restaurants, called the à la carte restaurant, was so fancy that you had to pay extra to eat there. The first-class cabins were decorated with silk curtains, elegant furniture, and the finest bedding. Even the second-class cabins were better than the first-class cabins on many other ships. The third-class cabins, though simple, were still more comfortable than those on most ships of that time. The Titanic cost $7,500,000 to build in 1912, which is about $200 million today. Tickets were also very expensive. A first-class ticket cost $4,350 back then, like paying $100,000 today. Second-class tickets were $60, about $1,500 today. Third-class tickets were $15 to $40, around $400 to $1,000 today. The Titanic was a luxury ship, and only the rich could afford first-class tickets. When the Titanic was finally completed, people all over the world were excited. It was the biggest ship ever built. Famous actors, businessmen, and wealthy families booked their tickets months in advance. Everyone wanted to be part of the Titanic's maiden voyage, its first journey from Southampton, England, to New York City, USA. The Titanic set sail on April 10, 1912. Crowds of people gathered at the port in Southampton to see the ship off. Families waved goodbye to their loved ones, and photographers clicked pictures of the grand ship as it slowly left the dock. On board were 2,224 passengers and crew members. Some of the wealthiest people in the world were there, including John Jacob Astor IV, one of the richest men in the world, Molly Brown, a famous socialite, Isidor Straus, the co-owner of Macy's department store, and his wife, Ida Straus. There were also immigrants travelling in third class, hoping to start a new life in America. For them, the Titanic represented hope and opportunity. The Titanic's journey began smoothly. The passengers enjoyed the luxurious facilities, and the crew worked hard to ensure everyone was comfortable. However, the Titanic received several warnings about icebergs from other ships in the area. These warnings were passed to the bridge, but some of them were ignored or not taken seriously. The ship continued to sail at full speed, as the captain wanted to reach New York on time and make headlines. Then came the night of April 14, 1912. It was a calm, cold night in the Atlantic Ocean. The sky was clear and the stars were shining brightly, but the water was unusually still, a condition sailors call a flat calm. Around 11:40 p.m., the Titanic was sailing at 22.5 knots, about 41.6 kilometers per hour. Suddenly, the lookout in the crow's nest spotted an iceberg directly ahead. He rang the warning bell and shouted, "Iceberg, right ahead!" The officer on duty ordered the ship to turn sharply to the left and reverse the engines, but it was too late. The iceberg scraped along the right side of the ship, tearing through the hull. The collision caused the watertight compartments to flood with water. Initially, the passengers didn't realize the seriousness of the situation. Many thought it was just a minor accident. The crew began to assess the damage. At first, the captain and the engineers believed the ship could stay afloat. But as water kept pouring in, it became clear that the Titanic was doomed. The ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, was on board and quickly realized that the Titanic would sink. He informed the captain that the ship had less than 2 hours before it would be underwater. The crew began to lower lifeboats into the water. But here's the tragedy. The Titanic only had 20 lifeboats, enough to carry about half the people on board. This was because the ship's owners thought having more lifeboats would make the decks look cluttered. Even worse, many lifeboats were launched half-hill because passengers didn't understand the urgency of the situation. Women and children were given priority, but there was no clear plan or organization. As the lifeboats were being lowered, chaos broke out. People were panicking, and some tried to jump into the lifeboats. The rich and famous were seen helping others, and many stayed behind, accepting their fate. The band on the Titanic continued to play music to keep passengers calm. Their final song is believed to have been "Nearer, My God, to Thee." At 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912, the Titanic sank beneath the icy waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Over 1,500 people lost their lives, and only about 700 survived. The survivors were rescued by a ship called the Carpathia, which arrived hours later. The tragedy shocked the world and led to major changes in maritime safety, including the requirement for enough lifeboats for everyone on board and regular lifeboat drills. The Titanic story has fascinated people for over a century. It's a tale of ambition, luxury, tragedy, and heroism. Even today, the wreck of the Titanic lies at the bottom of the Atlantic, more than 200 feet, 3,800 meters below the surface. It serves as a reminder of how human arrogance and overconfidence can lead to disaster.